Western selective humanitarianism, Syria earthquake falls on deaf ears. Following a devastating earthquake, several Western countries mobilized rapidly to send aid and rescue workers to Turkey but exclude Syria and neglect it.
Western humanitarianism is selective, and the earthquake in Syria receives no attention. After a severe earthquake, several Western nations quickly mobilized to deliver supplies and rescuers to Turkey but overlooked and ignored Syria. After a powerful 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck Turkey and Syria on Sunday, killing more than 2,300 people, U.S. President Joe Biden expressed that he was deeply saddened and pledged his nation's support. "The death toll and destruction brought on by the earthquake in Syria and Turkey break my heart," tweeted Biden. He said he would work with Turkey. His team would closely monitor the situation and offer any necessary support. In a statement later made public by the White House, he said, "Our teams are deploying quickly to begin to support Turkish search and rescue efforts and address the needs of those injured and displaced by the earthquake." According to the statement, Biden urged U.S. authorities to coordinate aid with their Turkish counterparts by getting in touch with them. About Syria, Biden suggested that humanitarian groups supported by the U.S. were responding to the devastation there. He may have been alluding to NGOs that operate in regions that are not under the control of the Syrian state, which might exclude the rest of the country from any such aid given that some of these groups are notorious for staging phony attacks to accuse the Syrian government of crimes it has not committed. The most significant concern is that other Western nations will most certainly adopt the U.S. selective humanitarianism. Several Western nations quickly mobilized after the earthquakes to send aid and rescue workers to Turkey. Still, they chose to ignore Syria by only expressing their sympathies and willingness to support the affected Syrians and doing nothing on the ground. What a blatant display of hypocrisy and double standards. Thousands of Syrians were left to face their fate on their own after the following nations and groups disregarded Syria's plea for international assistance in the wake of the deadly earthquake. EU offers Syria preconditioned assistance. According to EU Crisis Management Commissioner Janis Lenarsik and EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell, the EU has sent 10 search and rescue teams to Turkey after Ankara requested EU assistance. The EU also stated that it was prepared to assist those in need in Syria if requested, given that Syria had requested assistance from the international community. Speaking on behalf of the EU, Balazs Ajvari said the group is prepared to help Syria's earthquake recovery operations if necessary. "We can offer this aid since Turkey asked us for help while discussing the civil protection framework. Unfortunately, the mechanism is currently turned on by Turkey. Such a request from the Syrian side does not exist. But should that happen, we'll also make every effort to rally support in that direction." Ajvari spoke with journalists in Brussels. German assistance to a NATO ally. German Interior Minister Nancy Faeser stated that her country will mobilize all the assistance we can activate. According to Faeser, the Federal Agency for Technical Relief of Germany can set up camps to provide shelter as well as water treatment units, and is in close contact with the Turkish civil defense. She vaguely referenced Turkey when she claimed that the nation started the EU civil protection procedure and requested salvage and rescue teams. However, she continued by saying that Berlin is closely cooperating and will assist with all available resources that are most needed. Greece. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis promised to use every force available to assist its neighbor. Greece is an old foe of Turkey, and recent border and cultural issues have strained relations between Athens and Ankara. Following the devastating earthquake, Mitsotakis called Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Monday to offer immediate assistance, according to his office. According to the Greek Prime Minister's office, Erdogan thanked Mitsotakis for the assistance and prompt dispatch of rescuers and supplies on board a C-130 military plane. In his promise of assistance, the Greek minister did not mention Syria. While ignoring Syria entirely, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg expressed full solidarity with ally Turkey, claiming to be in contact with Turkey's top leadership and that NATO allies are mobilizing support now. Poland. Firefighters from Poland flew from Warsaw to Gaziantep, Turkey. Andrzej Bartkowiak, the chief commandant of the State Fire Department, stated that our team will be working non-stop, 24 hours a day, in 2 locations. Contrary to Gaziantep, despite the horrific destruction, Hama, Aleppo, and Latakia are just cities that are not intended to be helped. James Cleverly, the Foreign Minister for Britain, announced that the country was deploying 76 search and rescue personnel, equipment, and rescue dogs to Turkey. An emergency medical team from Britain was also dispatched to investigate the situation on the ground. But, like other Western friends, the UKFM cleverly omitted Syria. Japan. The Japan Disaster Relief Rescue Team is being sent to Turkey by the government of the country, which frequently experiences earthquakes. Qatar. Qatar announced that it would deploy 120 rescuers, a field hospital, relief aid, tents, and winter supplies to Turkey. However, despite their professed willingness to help, the UN, Ukraine, and Canada still need to deliver humanitarian aid to Syria. Countries that paid tribute did not specify a side. World Organization. The UN General Assembly observed a moment of silence in remembrance of the earthquake victims. Our staff is evaluating the situation on the ground and offering support. We rely on the global community to assist the thousands of families affected by this calamity, many of whom already had an urgent need for humanitarian relief in hard-to-reach locations, Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary-General, stated. Ukraine. Ukraine is ready to provide the necessary assistance to overcome the consequences of the disaster, according to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, tweeted, "Your thoughts are with the people who lost loved ones. Canada is prepared to offer support." Syrian authorities. After more than 850 people perished in Syria following a 7.8 magnitude earthquake in Turkey, the Syrian government pleaded with the world to help. Syria urges the International Committee of the Red Cross and other humanitarian organizations to support efforts to deal with the terrible earthquake, according to a statement from the Syrian Foreign Ministry. After meeting with UN officials and aid organizations, Syrian Foreign Minister Faisal Mikdad declared that the government was prepared to provide all the required facilities to international organizations so they can give Syrians humanitarian aid. More than 1,400 people have already died, and at least 2,400 more have been injured due to the earthquake that slammed parts of Syria. A journalist with Al Mayadeen said that 60 buildings had collapsed. Likewise, there have been 512 injuries and 161 deaths in the Aleppo governorate. 18 shelters were opened to provide accommodation for those impacted by the earthquake in the government. In Hama, 4 structures fell, resulting in the deaths of 37 people, 80 injuries overall, and the opening of 4 public shelters. In Latakia, 75 buildings collapsed, 232 people died, and nearly 700 injuries per 100,000 people. In the region, 12 shelters were opened. Syria cannot completely respond to the awful calamity because of the war, which damaged its infrastructure, the harsh Western sanctions placed on it, the U.S. occupation of certain Syrian territory, and the plundering of billions of dollars worth of its resources. As a result, the 7.8 magnitude earthquake is claiming an increasing number of lives. Notably, the so-called Caesar Act, which allowed Congress to impose harsh economic sanctions against Syria, was signed into law by then U.S. President Donald Trump in 2020. Anyone conducting business with the Syrian government may be subject to travel restrictions and financial sanctions under the sanctions. According to the U.S., the Caesar Act and other U.S.-Syria sanctions do not target humanitarian assistance for the Syrian people, and Washington will keep providing what it claims to be humanitarian aid to Syrians. Although Biden did not mention the deadly earthquake that shook Syria, this was not the case after it occurred. To further compound matters, Damascus International Airport is still receiving upkeep and repairs after being the target of an Israeli airstrike on January 2. Israeli occupation forces repeatedly attacked the airport with assaults and airstrikes, rendering it inoperable. This truth cannot be disregarded since it will inevitably impede the delivery of humanitarian aid to the nation. But the following nations have reacted to Syria's urgent appeal for humanitarian aid. Lebanon. The Syrian government, its citizens, and the relatives of the deceased all received heartfelt condolences from the Lebanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates, which also expressed Lebanon's readiness to lend Syria a helping hand as it deals with the earthquake's effects. Najib Mikati, the Prime Minister of Lebanon, also informed Hussein Arnas, his Syrian counterpart, that Lebanon will use its logistical resources to support the ongoing humanitarian efforts in Syria. Algeria. The Syrian government, people, and relatives of the dead have received heartfelt condolences from the Algerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Algeria proclaims its complete solidarity and expresses its desire to overcome this adversity with much tenacity and fortitude, according to a statement from the ministry. China. China said it was prepared to deliver immediate humanitarian aid to Syria to help the country deal with the earthquake's impact. Xu Wei, a spokesman for the China International Development Cooperation Agency, quoted the Xinhua news agency as saying, "Beijing is ready to provide urgent humanitarian assistance to Syria according to the needs." Iran. Ibrahim Raisi, the president of Iran, declared that Iran is prepared to send immediate relief aid to Turkey and Syria and expressed sympathy for the heartbreaking incident. An Iranian relief plane is expected to land at Damascus International Airport this evening, according to an Al Mayadeen correspondent in the city. Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin pledged to dispatch Russian teams to both countries in phone conversations with his Syrian and Turkish colleagues. The Kremlin said that Russian emergency ministry rescuers would depart for Syria. In the nearest hours, rescuers from the Russian emergency ministry will take off for Syria. Additionally, the Russian Defense Ministry mentioned the 300 military soldiers stationed in Syria are contributing to the cleanup operation. Cuba. On Twitter, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel sent his sympathies to the Syrian people and administration, expressing his country's solidarity and willingness to work with them to help those in need. India. According to the Indian Foreign Ministry, 2 of India's 100-person National Disaster Response Force teams and dog squads and equipment are prepared to be transported to the impacted area. Additionally, doctors and paramedics with medications were getting ready. The killings in Turkey and Syria, according to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, have him anguished and deeply pained. In phone discussions with his Syrian and Turkish counterparts, UAE Emirati President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan offered assistance, according to the official WAM news agency. According to the official news agency WAM, Emirati Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum directed urgent humanitarian aid to those affected in Syria, promising to provide Syria with aid valued at about $13.6 million. Invaded Golan. The Syrian Golan residents, under occupation, have already voiced their solidarity with those in their native country of Syria. The squares of our country are filled with individuals who have hearts that trust in God's will and destiny. We pray to God to provide the deceased a peaceful rest and to grant healing to the wounded as we share in the agony of our beloved nation, Syria, which has been devastated by an earthquake that struck the country's provinces, according to a statement from Golani residents.